Hey friends, looking for some great business content other than right here on Accelerate? Then check out C-Suite TV and watch in-depth interviews with business content for C-Suite leaders and entrepreneurs, including an interview with me, your favorite podcast host. And it's all on demand. Watch and get insider secrets on demand by going to csuitetv.com. That's c-suitetv.com. Business insights on demand. Okay, let's do the show. It's time to accelerate. Hi, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 446 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record, where I hold in-depth conversations with today's leading experts in sales, marketing, and leadership 6 days a week. So be sure to go to iTunes, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. Are you in a sales slump? Then you need to visit accelerate.fm/spark to find out how to restart the engine on your sales machine by downloading my step-by-step guide titled How to Spark a Sales Turnaround. It's based on my interviews with over 300 of the world's leading sales experts right on this show, and it's packed full of actionable advice that you can use right now. So go to accelerate.fm/spark to download your free copy today. You know, it's a given that how customers buy has changed, and the little thing called the internet has irrevocably changed how buyers identify their needs and research and evaluate products and potential vendors. And what that all means is how we need to sell has also irrevocably changed. More and more of the sales process is being conducted remotely or virtually. As we all know, that's not quite the same as selling in person. It requires some special skill sets. So join me today to talk about that and help walk us through how to sell virtually. For a second time is Doug Devitre. He's the founder of Doug Devitre International and author of a really excellent book called Screen-to-Screen Selling. And something else I really want to dive into with him, he says he's a wannabe sushi chef. So, Doug, how you doing?
You know, eating as much sushi as I did, or maybe I used to, I was asking, how do you make it? Just like kind of the technology, how do you make it work? So I got all the ingredients. First time I went to the store, I bought the actual regular fish, so there's like salmon grade and then there's like salmon. Well, I bought the regular salmon. We had a whole bunch of guests over and, good thing my friend asked me what type of fish that was before I cut it up. Otherwise, it would have been a disaster. But, no, I still make it from time to time, okay. All different types. I like probably the art more than I like anything else. So.
Sure. No, there definitely is an art for there. Okay. Well, so, it's been a year since we last talked, actually, on the show. I mean, we've talked in the interim, but let's talk about screen-to-screen selling. This is a term that I think you popularized in many respects. So refresh people's memories about what that means. I mean, if they don't intuitively understand, then let's also talk about what's changed in that domain in the last year.
Yeah, you bet. So the whole idea or the premise of screen-to-screen selling is how to communicate your idea or your message, or maybe that's to sell your product or service, or maybe it's to influence others in arriving at a decision using some of the latest technology. Now, I know from before we did the podcast just kind of through audio, but now we've got video, which is cool because we'll be able to kind of demonstrate some of those concepts that are going to be different in terms of not just the conversational flow,
right,
but also how we articulate and communicate complex ideas, especially when we get into the consultative type of sales process.
Yeah, and I think that there's, gosh, I feel almost tired of talking about this. And so many interviews recently, people are talking about automation and sales technology and this seeming desire to sort of take the human out of the sale. And this is certainly screen to screen the way we're talking today. And you look at the investments companies are making in this technology, really reinforces the idea that the human part is as essential, if not even more so than it used to be. We may be more remote than we used to be, but a lot of the same things in terms of building relationships, rapport, looking at visual cues, all that stuff is still there.
Yeah, what's different is now that the technology has kind of caught up, now we can be a little bit more creative. Now we don't have to worry, is it going to work or is it not going to work? Just because, the internet's getting faster and we've got much better tools today.
Yeah, I mean, if we haven't clogged up our computers with having too many apps open, as I did before we started this interview and had to force quit many of them. But talking about Zoom, so, in this case, we say, okay, this virtual selling, is this really a thing? But, they just I think they passed $1 billion valuation, right? So with their latest round of investment. I mean, that's pretty significant. And Citrix, that owns GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, they just purchased Join.me.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of big players saying, hey, this is something we see as critical going forward, strategic to our companies.
No kidding. Well, if you look at, there's probably 100 different types of video conference technologies or screen sharing technologies that are out there. What made Zoom so popular so quickly, which, they have an out of the world engagement rate or customer retention rate. It's just, it puts all the other software as a service companies to shame. How do you get those numbers? Because they built, from the ground up, Eric Wan, who's the CEO, brought a bunch of engineers over from Cisco and then said, how do we make the most usable software? And boy, I mean, when I first started writing screen-to-screen selling, Join.me was kind of my go-to tool.
Right.
Then I started using Zoom. And just because I've studied usability with technology, interface and design, I knew right away that Zoom was a contender and even kind of a platform that I could use with my own clients. So not just talking about how great it is, but I actually use it on a regular basis, believe it or not.
Well, no, I believe it. I mean, I was on a couple Zoom calls earlier today before I recorded this. I mean, that certainly has become increasingly my platform for talking with clients and holding meetings with remote employees, as well as for the podcast itself. I mean, we still use Skype, for a large number of them, but increasingly that balance is changing. Partially because of the quality, partially because it's a little bit, the user interface is a little bit more business friendly.
Yeah, a question that I get asked, and it's something we covered on the first podcast, but I just want to kind of reinforce it, or for the listeners missed the first one. The question I get asked is, which is the best tool, right? Which is the best tool? If I were going to choose one, which one would it be? And my number one is whatever the customer's most familiar with.
Sure.
Right? Because if they've used Skype and they're not familiar with Zoom, not only going to be a little bit hesitant, but something doesn't work, they're going to blame the technology or they're going to blame you.
Right.
No one likes to assume responsibility when it doesn't work.
Well, I mean, I've had this issue though with Skype. So Skype's been around forever.
Yeah.
And I interview people that are pretty smart people on my show, and you'd be surprised how many have an issue with Skype. There's an issue meaning I don't know how to use it. And I'm like, seriously? I mean, you're like, one guy was a pretty smart guy in terms of training and technology-based training. It's like, you're trying to tell me that you're freaked out by Skype?
Well, I'd say this: if you can't get, like, right now today, we're in February 2017.
Right.
If you can't get your camera to work, you have a mindset problem, not a technology problem.
Well, exactly, right? Yeah, I mean, hopefully these people are probably still ones sitting at home looking at their what used to be their VCR. Maybe they still have a VCR blinking 12 at them all the time, right?
I mean, seriously, and if you were going to hold a meeting, right, and every time you needed to hold a meeting or have a conference call, you had to call technical support, wouldn't that be a drain on your resources rather than actually improving the productivity condition that we're trying to?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's getting to the point where it's pretty excuse-free. I mean, most of the major solutions that we've talked about today, pretty easy to your first time to get on there and make it work. And they make it so easy to join. So there's really no excuse, I think, really, for not using these tools. I mean, I could see that, people are still a little reluctant. Like I had somebody I was speaking with today. I give them the option of recording the interview, video or audio, and they was like insistent, I don't do video. But
right. The mindset. I mean,
that's a mindset. I mean, it's going away. I mean, the chance of having a better level of engagement and so on really goes up when you can see somebody.
I mean, listen. Let's say we're going to start our call at 3:00 and it's 2:30. Like I'm looking at the clock in 2:30. I'm not going to start preparing at 3 when our meeting starts.
Right.
Even though there would typically be a 30-minute, let's say, drive time to go see you if you were local, in that 30 minutes, I'm preparing links. I'm doing a little bit of research so that when we have that conversation, 50% of the virtual meeting is done before it even starts. So if we're not,
meaning what? So if people listening, what does that 50% entail?
Well, 50%. So that could be what's the result-driven agenda. So in other words, as a result of this call, what are we going to be able to decide upon at the end of it? Are we going to decide?
Which you should do anyway, right? I mean, that's good sales practice. So, I mean, is there anything else on top of good conventional sales practice that you need to really focus on preparing prior to a good screen-to-screen call like this.
Yeah, you bet. So, I mean, just simple things you wouldn't think about until you made the mistake and you embarrassed yourself and the other people who you're talking to. Number one is close down all your instant messengers.
Yeah.
Well, the last thing you want to have happen is a screen share conversation, and then there's a Facebook instant message or Skype instant message that talks about something embarrassing that you did that you wouldn't want your customer to see.
Or an invitation to do something embarrassing at that moment. Yes.
Right. And yes. if we're doing a screen share conversation, chances are I'm going to close down all of the windows, all of the programs, all of the documents, all the contracts that I had up before. So then that way, when I get into screen share mode, I'm not having to kind of saying, "Oops, you're not supposed to see that," or closing things down in a last minute, reactive situation.
Right.
I'd also say this, as far as your preparation goes, there's going to be visuals that you are going to want to prepare ahead of time. And the easiest visuals to prepare is a website that already exists.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do a Google search, you pull up the company's website beforehand, or maybe you're talking about, let's say, Amazon, an example. Let's say we do Amazon. Well, boy, I want to make sure that I have all those sites, products, and links pulled up ahead of time. That way, I'm not going back and forth. Hey, Andy, hold on 1 second while I find this.
Oh, the internet connection's slow today. Yeah.
And you'll see that, you'll see that done during, let's say, a live presentation or a conversation. Let me try to find that. But the problem is in the virtual world, the time accelerates 10 times faster when you're waiting. So if you say, hold on a minute, in 5 seconds, I'm going to be thinking, is he ready yet?
Yeah.
The longer that you make somebody wait for something that you could have easily prepared ahead of time, it does several things. It decreases the productivity of the conversation. It makes you think that the other person might be wasting your time or respect your time because you're not prepared. So there's a lot of things to consider when you get into, before it even starts. What are some just key things that we need to do before that conversation?
Well, and eliminate distractions as well, right? So turn your phone off, put it away. Don't be tempted. I mean, part of the reason I think the wait time looks so long is when you're waiting for somebody. If you're in a meeting like this and somebody says, "Yeah, let me find that," is you've got everything on your desktop you can sort of look at, right? So I checked my mail and you're still not there. I mean, that seems like a long time.
Well, whenever we get into a situation, I mean, right now, let's say if you were the customer and I was a salesperson, we're talking, just like this,
right?
Face to face, eyeball to eyeball. We're laughing. I can see that you're smiling. I can see that you're not checking your phone. We're building rapport.
Right.
I'm asking you questions about what are some of you could go basic or you could go to advanced depending on your relationship. What's your biggest challenge, or specifically in your budget line, which of the items do you need to look at? Well, once you ask that question and then the customer says, "Tell me more," that then gives you permission to pull up the visual on the screen share. Mm-hmm. And so the common mistake that folks make during, let's say, your demo is they pull up the screen share too quickly. And then it's like, oh my gosh, now I'm already in this pitch that I don't even know if you know what I need to know in order to make a good decision.
Interesting. So so you sort of triggered a thought when you talk about the "tell me more" question, because that's a bilateral question, right? That's a great question to ask to your prospects. That's very interesting. You ask them a great, what I call killer question up front. They pause, they think about it, give you an answer. Interesting. Tell me more about that. Do you ever encourage the customer then to open up screen share and to power up, their website or some?
Whatever helps them accelerate their decision-making process, I say go ahead. However, and there's kind of like a however.
Yes.
What I would suggest is it's your responsibility as kind of the facilitator of that conversation is to make sure that the customer is asking the right questions, that they are kind of taking this overall big picture so they can then filter it down to a decision rather than wait. I mean, because if you're a customer, you start, hey, say, look at, Andy, will you look at my website real quick? I might say, well, not yet. We're not ready for that yet. Let's not waste time talking about your website when there's actually a bigger priority or a bigger issue that we have to address first.
Okay.
Maybe it's a strategic conversation before it becomes a tactical conversation.
Right.
To show you.
Well, yeah, you have to earn the right to have information revealed to you. But so let's sort of take a step back to the beginning, because there's great new book out, The Science of Selling by David Hoffeld. I don't know if you've read that book. Very, interesting things that I've read a lot about myself in terms of perceptions and how perceptions are built, and especially at the beginning and points of engagement between you and a customer. So what are some of the tips you have for people to say, look, we get on a call like this? I mean, one of the things that's research has shown that, hey, just that mere act of smiling, predisposes the customer to open up and to like you, be more receptive to you. I mean, what other advice do you have for people along those lines right at the beginning of a call, just when you get started?
I think camera position is also critical early on, because when you start a call, it depends on what software you're using, you have your camera that you actually see yourself on the computer screen.
Right?
So many times it might appear on like the far right-hand side of the screen or top, or it might appear at the far bottom right of the screen. Well, the problem with that, actually, this is what Zoom does really well, is they
center it, right?
Centered underneath the actual camera, standard to laptops, which is, it's a design it's a design that they put into the software that just makes it a little bit more user friendly.
Right.
Also, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that you talk about camera position. That's a great one, right? So people on the other side feel like you're actually looking at them in the eye, and as much as you can, keep your eye focused on the light where the camera is. I mean, that's really making a connection there.
Yeah.
But the other thing is making sure that you're not having your camera either sitting on your lap looking up at the ceiling. That's a common one. I mean,
even if you do, right? Even if you do you're in that situation where the laptop is facing the ceiling, turn the camera off. Just because you have the option to use in the software doesn't necessarily mean that you have to use it.
True, but if the customer has the camera on, you need to reciprocate, right?
Yeah.
That is, and sometimes if you're making these calls, right? So I've seen this on Skype, and I do this all the time. Is my default is I'm going to turn the camera on, and it's not always everybody's expectation. They're like, "Oh, are we doing video?" It's like, well, sure.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's wrong to assume that somebody else is going to use video. I think that's one of those questions early on, is that if you kind of pressure too much, even though, the reason why we discussed this earlier, the reason people don't do this is because they're afraid of video.
But hey, more and more. I just sort of do it as the default, and I would say 95% of people are fine with it. But there's always going to be a few percentage, and so that's fine. If they don't want to do it, we'll turn it off. That's not an issue. But so look at the ceiling, not a good idea. Any other sort of weird camera angles? Some people work with two screens on their desk.
You can work with two screens. Problem with that sometimes
where the camera's on this, or no, they're looking at this one, but the camera's on this one. They see you on this one, but the camera's over here. It's like, that's really disconcerting. Yeah,
they're trying to be productive with the two screens, but it's actually hurting the conversation.
Yeah, and so if that's your setup and you're the seller, get yourself on one screen.
Right now it's not an issue for you and me because we've got white walls behind us. But if you have, let's say you're in a busy office environment. I don't know if I have one here. Yeah, I've got one right here actually. This is a web around the backdrop.
Oh yeah.
That you can put, it actually latches on right on the back of your
chair. Right.
So then that way, what it does is actually signals everybody else that's in the office and environment, hey, Andy's busy right now. He's got his screen up.
Yeah, you think that'd work? I mean, unfortunately with sort of the open office, I've found people making calls to me as well as me making calls to people where they're in the completely open office and they're just sitting there at their desk trying to do a video call. And that again, if you have the choice and you're making an important sales call, go into find a conference room.
Yeah.
Or you work from home when you're doing that call and then go back into the office. But it's just polite to make it as quiet as possible.
You bet. We talked about lighting a little bit. This is the chat light. This is what I put the latches on right on top of the laptop or other device.
Chat light. Huh.
And so you plug this in USB to charge it, and that's all it is. There's just one button on and off, and then it just sits right up here. So, when you have no light, when you're in a situation with no light, this is your next best option.
All right. Gosh, all sorts of useful. And so how big does the thing behind your chair go? I mean, because you have fairly wide camera view right here. So if you were a rep sitting in an office, does it?
It'll take up the entire window here.
It will take up the entire window?
If you're using a webcam, it'll take up the entire window. Depending on your webcam that you might be using, there's a lot of different units that you can look at. This is probably, if you're just using a regular webcam, this is kind of like a Logitech if it's not built in.
Yeah.
This is another one that's a little bit different. This is the Logitech conference cam. And so this is a little bit of a fancier camera that you could have plugged into the side that just kind of creates a different experience, especially if you have multiple people sitting around the room.
Right.
This will kind of widen that angle. That way, people's heads aren't cut off when you're trying to have a conversation.
Right. So it's a wide angle lens. It doesn't do tracking based on who talks, though, does it? Or
this one has like a little remote that you can move around.
Okay.
So yeah.
Wow,
it won't do it automatically. There are cameras that
like you could put your stuff on a swivel. Yeah, that would track. If you had the device on you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, those are good tips. What other sort of practical ones for people that are starting to get into this and do more calls like this?
Well, let's go. If you want to, we can go into the screen share.
Sure.
I can show you a little bit of some of the nuances that
Let's do it.
And before we kind of lead into it, this is kind of in the section where you get into the conversation where a customer says, "Tell me more."
Right.
And then you've earned the right to then get into the visual demonstration, because now we're connecting intellectually through the screen share, and we're trying to get on the same kind of mental frame through the screen share itself. So okay. I would say, hey, Andy, do you mind if I share my screen with you? Is that okay?
That'd be great.
Awesome. So I'm just going to go real quick and then click it. And now you're going to be able to see what I'm looking at. And I think what you said, Andy, is you wanted to buy some new technology for either your car, for your office. And what I'd like to do here is maybe get a little bit of a better understanding of what you want, and then we can filter down some of the decisions, because boy, you can spend a whole lot of time searching on Amazon and Google and not get exactly what you want.
Right.
So just real quick, what do you see on my screen right now?
I see a smiley face.
Okay, perfect. So maybe you can tell me a little bit about what you're trying to accomplish by adding some of the new technology.
All right, well, I'm trying to find a new router.
Okay.
High-speed router.
Now, interestingly enough, some of the routers now today, if you're looking at your office or your home office, you actually have to buy another router to extend it.
Yes.
So maybe if that's something of interest, we're
looking at that. Something like I've read about this Eero product, let's say.
Yeah. So I'm just you said router, but I'm also going to put extender here just to see if that's
sure.
going to be a good fit. What else are you looking at?
That's it really today.
Really? What about your home? Have you been looking at some of the smartphone features where you can actually talk to turn your lights on?
Well, a little bit, because we have our new Amazon Echo, so we could integrate that with Alexa. But not so much yet.
I was gonna say, like right now I can say, Alexa, turn all lights on, and then boom, they all go on, and then. Alexa, turn all lights off, and then they go off. And you know what's great about this, rather than just the productivity? It's a great game for kids. Kids love playing with Alexa.
Oh yeah, well, we've read about some of those.
right.
Kids putting their sleeping mother's thumbprint on their iPhone to be able to open the Amazon app and order things.
So I'm just going to put in here Alexa /
And so I'll describe for the people that are listening and not watching that you're using an application to, if you're sitting here having a meeting with a prospect, as you actually have a manual note-taking app that's up on the screen.
Yeah, you bet. I just want to share
and which one is that you're using?
This is the app called Doceri. Doceri. This acts as my telestrator to overlay on top of a website or to overlay on top of a PowerPoint presentation. Mm-hmm. Then this gives me the ability to interact. This gives me the ability to customize the presentation in the moment. This gives me the ability to create the value with you, so that I'm not making any assumptions that whatever product or widget or feature that I have that I'm selling is going to be your fit. So I'm trying to get to kind of what you want to accomplish first, and then kind of create this together.
Yeah, so you can see this. Yeah, obviously, people watching this on video, you can see this. For those of us, or those of you who can't see it, yeah, it's a great way to take notes, get agreement on the agenda, and as you said, sort of collaborate in real time in terms of creating the agenda and what you're going to do next.
Because here's what you have, just from a communication standpoint. Maybe you've seen this in some sort of other diagram. There's a difference between what you say, what you know, what you do, and what you understand. And there's between what the other person understands. So
right.
if how many times has a customer said something to you and then you misinterpreted it,
right,
and then created an entirely different dialogue than what the customer wanted to go because you misinterpreted what they said?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the benefit of writing down, and especially when you're talking financials, like nobody wants to be off of zero.
Right, and I think the other thing too, excuse me for misspeaking, but if you read books from Dan Rome, wrote the back of the envelope in his most recent book, Draw to Win, which is all about how do you use drawing as a way to more effectively communicate concepts and ideas and so on. And this would be a great tool to do it. You don't have to. You can do it on the fly, and it can be quite effective, especially if you don't have like a whiteboard behind you.
You bet.
Yeah.
And so this is drawing on steroids, because now we're equipping it with some of the latest technology. We don't have to be in the same room for us to demonstrate that. Mm-hmm. And typically, what you see in maybe a highly consultative environment, or if you're selling in an enterprise situation where you're in the room with a group and you're selling by flip chart.
Yeah.
So this is the same exact idea, except now we're not only doing it more effectively because we have some of this tech, but now we can shorten the amount of time that it takes from, let's say, idea or concept into execution, because we've got multiple people on the same kind of page,
right?
Based upon whatever the facilitator decides. The facilitator or the salesperson decides that this is the next visual that we need to be on together in order to move forward.
Right. Yeah, well, I think that the spontaneity, is what's really important with this type of thing. So if you're talking about something, and what happens too often is people get into the middle of their slides, and we're just gonna power through the slides, and the customer's bringing up a point that's just it's orthogonal, it's really germane to what they need. Yeah, take a break and power up Doceri and draw out, is this what you meant? Make a flow chart, make a system diagram, whatever you're talking about, and ask if they understand, if your understanding is correct, and get their affirmative or no, let's change it a little bit here. And as soon as they start changing it, then suddenly there's some ownership taking place here.
So here's where sales and marketing can collaborate a little bit better, in my opinion, is by the marketing team taking the conversation from the sales professional and architecting a diagram that acts as the visual frame to lead the conversation at a faster rate than your blank flip chart or whiteboard allows.
Okay.
Do you want to
Sure, go ahead.
What I mean?
Yeah.
It'd be great, because we're still on screen share here. I'm going to go back to the app, and then I'm just going to open up a blank little page.
Sure.
Because I've already have these conversations that have happened in the past, I can go right to the visual and insert the visual based off of what we're talking about in the moment, rather than hitting an arrow key back and forth on PowerPoint. I get there without any delay. So this is just an example of visual. And
this is something you created in Doceri, or you created in PowerPoint and then imported into Doceri?
So good question. So what this is, as far as how it was created, was using another iPad app called Graphio. It's about a $9 app, but it's a process visual. It's if you're into user experience and design, it can be a good app. But all it did, it was just allow me to create the lines for this.
Okay.
So based upon whatever we're talking about in the moment, I can then architect the visual or kind of fill in the blank together with the customer rather than just lead in with bulleted slides.
Yeah. So for people listening to this, what Doug's put up on the screen is a grid with 4 columns, 5 columns. And the far left one is the customer journey, basically various steps. And then you've got across the top, you've got column 1 is awareness, 2 conversion, 3 adoption, and 4 block by my face, ROI.
So if I were to fill that in with you together, let's say this is what it was. I mean, I've created this in the past before, but let's say I filled it in together. My expertise as a sales professional is in process, right? Your input through my process helps you get your outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're looking at the process, the art, this will work. So let's take it back to marketing now, is that now that marketing looks at the conversations that the sales professional are having on a regular basis, now what marketing can do is create a visual like this that outlines the process for the sales professional to fill in the blank with the customer so that now, to do something like this would usually take like 3 or 4 meetings. Boy, now we can get it down to 1. Or maybe if you're used to having hour meetings in the past, now it's no more than 20 minutes.
Well, and plus you can modify it as well.
Well, yeah, we're working in the best interest of our time here.
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea
and the prospect's time
is improving productivity.
Yep.
So why have a longer conversation when you have to? If you can get it all in, shorter.
So this document we're looking at today, or looking at right now, this grid, this is sitting on your iPad?
Yeah.
So how are you displaying that?
So I'll just pull this up because what I've got here is I'm going to take a screenshot of what appears on my iPad, and then I'm going to insert it back in as a visual. Because you have to think about, how do you get pictures in real quick? We have to have them saved as visuals. So this is what the dose. I'm just going to write this in again, so in case you didn't get it the first time. DOCERI. It's a free app for the iPad, but it will work with a PC or an Apple computer. Okay. You just have to have an iPad to use it. Now, if you're using Android, look at, I think a Whiteboard is the popular one. You can check that out.
Okay.
But so as we're looking here, as far as the visuals go, some are standard how they appear through Apple. But if I were to scroll down here through my different categories of visuals, a category of visual equals 1 PowerPoint presentation, right? Right. So let's say your traditional PowerPoint presentation has 20 slides.
Okay.
Well, what I'm then going to do is, let's say, save that as the eco-friendly customer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now if I'm speaking to an eco-friendly customer, because granted, you're going to have different types of customers come in, I can now go to the the eco-friendly kind of folder of pictures, find the right picture, and then insert it into the conversation all within seconds.
Right.
We're not talking, open up, close, and closing on different programs. We're talking about, tap, tap, click, and you're done.
Yeah, it's very cool. Very cool. Yeah, for people who can't see it. I mean, I'm just in love with this idea of diagramming and doing it in real time. Yeah, and this looks like a great tool to do it. So it's just your iPad just connected through Bluetooth with the computer?
So it's done through Wi-Fi, and you have to be on the same
Wi-Fi. Okay. And
I'll tell you, you remember how we were talking about, Amazon, like which router do I buy?
Yeah.
When I go and I speak at hotels and large conferences, it's BYOR, bring your own router.
Really?
So now what I do is I plug in my router. I don't even need the internet. I just need my computer and my iPad to talk to one another. I bring in my own router. I just plug it in. I don't need to connect to anything except for the 2 devices.
Very cool. Right.
And now I've got a 2-way conversation that I can take with me anywhere I go. Just as long as I can plug into HDMI, or I've got it somewhere, one of those mini projectors.
Right.
You can go straight to the iPad to the mini projector.
Yeah.
With the different options you have.
Very cool. Well, great suggestions for people.
I got one more for you, Andy.
All right, let's do it before we go. One more.
Yeah. So we've got, think about, let's say if you did have a conversation that lasted 60 minutes.
Right.
Do you remember everything that was talked about during the conversation?
No one does.
So I don't know why we set ourselves up for failure like that. So I'm going to show you just one more feature inside here, because I think that this is going to be a new trend. It's just a matter of how quickly can folks adapt to it. I think Zoom is kind of like Facebook, 10 years ago. I think it's really going to catch on once folks are now exposed to a new way, a new idea of communicating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what I just inserted here, or what I clicked on, was this little arrow button pointing to the right.
Yep.
So in the Apple world, that's the share button. I click on that, and now the next thing that I do is I share as PDF. So do you see right here where it says of 5 slides?
Right.
So now what I do is at the end of the conversation, I'll send a PDF summary that contains all the visuals diagrammed through the conversation. And now we have kind of our notes conducted in a visual format that then I don't have to type out that 20-minute email that summarized all the key talking points, because now it's in a user-friendly PDF.
Yeah, well, on top of which, with the Zoom, you can use a system like gong.io that will actually provide a transcription and a report that summarizes sort of the key elements that were discussed during the call. Through the AI, they're recognizing repetitive terms and things that are used. So, I think about that from a customer standpoint, that will be pretty powerful if you can help supply them with perhaps not even it could be the recording of the call itself, which I think it's always good to record calls and offer them. But
as long as you check your state laws and have permission.
Well, you have to ask them first, right? Ask the customer, look, we would like to record this, we'll provide you a copy of it so you have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, especially if you're looking and say, look, what can we do with shorter calls, right? I mean, if it's an hour call, they're not going to go through, but maybe they would if they remember at a certain time they made a really great point, and they'll make sure that they remember to tell somebody else, other vendors. There you go.
You bet. And if you want to take it and put it into your project management or your checklist, now you can go right to the visual to be able to do that, which is much easier trying to think, what did we talk about?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's true. No one can remember. So unless you're taking notes and you remember the key points, increasingly recording calls is going to be done on everything, I think. Even in-person calls. We're seeing some technology, Spearfish and some other that are pioneering that. I think it makes sense. We get rid of the sales operating purely as on the basis of anecdote and actually start saying, we've got a real record of what was said. If we can find a way to make it simply and easily available to people, more the better. So, well, Doug, as always, it's been fantastic talking to you. Remind people how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, you bet. So, screen-to-screenselling.com is the site that has a lot of free content. We had a video podcast, we got a digital magazine, we've got a ton of videos that are not just us talking together, but actual demonstrations of how to use some of the latest software that you have at your fingertips. Mm-hmm. And then the book Screen to Screen Selling is everywhere. It's on Barnes & Noble, it's on Amazon, it's at 800 CEO Read, and in August, it will be translated into Japanese.
Very cool. What other languages have you had it translated into so far? Is that the first one?
That's it. So Japanese.
Perfect.
You write the book that you won't be able to read.
Well, they don't do the translations unless people want to buy it. So that's a good sign. Congratulations.
Thanks.
All right. Well, Doug, thank you. And friends, as always, thank you for taking the time to join us. Remember to make it part of your day every day to deliberately learn something new to help you accelerate your success. And easy way to do that is make sure you join all my conversations with top business experts like my guest today, Doug Devitre, who shares expertise about how to accelerate the growth of your business. So thanks again for joining me. Until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.